Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and good night. Whatever time of day it is, and whatever day it is, I want to thank you for listening to another episode of Eric Herman for Kansas House 53. This is episode 9, where we're going to talk about infrastructure and green technology. But before we do that, I do offer my apology for the general ums and awkward pauses of this video. I'm still pretty new to this, as well as the overall audio video editing of this. I'll try to do this in one take. As well as I don't think there's going to be any vulgarity in this one, but there might be. This is for people of voting age, so I kind of consider this 18 plus uh, media, but this one should be pretty tame. So without further ado, let's go ahead and let's get into the episode here. All right, so infrastructure and green technology. Now, this is generally a pretty bipartisan topic. A lot of Republicans and a lot of Democrats, they're going to more or less agree that there are some things that we want to get done in terms of spending money with. And I'm going to kind of sound a little bit against the Libertarian Party at this one because the reality is that taxes do exist. If I get elected, I'm going to have to take votes of me spending money, and it really does no good for that money to not get spent. I'm not an anarchist. I'm just about limited government. So that's what we want to talk about. We want to talk about how do we spend our taxes on what infrastructure do we actually want to spend our taxes on? And some of that infrastructure, we're going to be talking about roads and stuff like that. But before we do that, I'm going to backtrack just a little bit because what I think that we should be spending our money on is basically things that inherently benefit the society as a whole. So, for instance, I have talked about education in um, past videos, and the idea is that we do have taxes that are supposed to go towards education. I think that we as a society do want our children to grow up to be adults that can read, can write, are critical thinkers that have some sort of, let's just say, elementary knowledge of science and history and culture and geography, so that way they can interact with people that might be highly educated in one of those fields. And I talked about how that should be going through student vouchers, but that's a whole nother thing. Whether you think it should go through privatized education or public education, that's where the debate is at. But yeah, I understand why tax dollars need to fund education. Another thing that we've talked about is we've talked about healthcare, and a question that I get asked a lot is, do I support the expanding Medicaid and Medicare? And I do not, because I think that it is a broken system. I don't think you can take an axe to Medicaid like some, let's say, extremists might think, because the reality is that there are people tomorrow that are going to need access to those tools. And I think it's going to be a slow process where we're going to have to start to pulling out threads piece by piece and unraveling the knot that is government interference in Medicaid. We can't just snap our fingers and make it private healthcare, make all of it privatized out of nowhere, because that's going to really mess with a lot of people's access to healthcare. And like anyone and everyone, I have a heart. I don't want poor people to die from cancer just because they're poor, while rich people can go get whatever cosmetic surgery they want to remove some ugly mole or something like that. Like there has to be some sort of balance to it. But privatization, I do believe, will ultimately lead to better healthcare with lower costs, as opposed to government interference in that. But the government is so involved, we can't just delete the government out of nowhere on it. So let's see here. What else do I have? Oh, yeah, kind of the same situation with Social Security, like things like unemployment and things like that. I understand that it's there. People have been promised this stuff. For people that are in the retirement phase of their life, they have been promised Social Security. They deserve it because it is a promise, and I do believe that promises should be kept. But we need to start phasing the government out of our social systems, because you should have access to your money and you should be starting to invest it as soon as you turn an adult. And that's something that a lot of people just don't have access to. And we need to change the path on that. But let's go back and like I said, when I did this, when I started these, I wanted to hit up the top 10 points on platform that I had for my website. And episode 9 is kind of a combination of two of them where I talked about green technology or, all that sort of stuff, as well as infrastructure. I'm going to kind of mash them into this one podcast. So, when I was younger, I was probably all about government, vouchers or whatever that kind of help people transition into green things. Like, like the government will pay 50% if you get the solar panels or if you buy an electric car and things like that. And when I was younger, I thought that was like super cool. And now that I'm older, I'm starting to understand that one, the government is bad at basically every single thing that it does. And two, it doesn't actually help, solve the planet or the climate crisis or whatever people want to talk about. Um, because it can only be solved naturally. If you are interfering with that by government tax dollars going to fund people that can afford an 80,000 electric vehicle, I mean, the people that can't afford a $40,000 electric vehicle, or the ones that are paying $5,000 for a used gasoline fueled vehicle, are not benefiting from this stuff. And it doesn't help. That's the problem. Cheap energy is what helps, because cheap energy lets people have access to the quality of life that they need so that they can be prosperous. And prosperity inherently will bring out will bring like future opportunities to people. Um, I just think of our reliance on foreign oil, and whether you think of that as coming from an ally or a semi-ally, I don't care how good you think it is that we're getting oil from Saudi Arabia, or if we got oil from let's say the United Kingdom. Uh, Different political parties are in there, and being dependent on someone else. Well, obviously that goes very much against what a lot of libertarians believe in. Um, as just a lifestyle choice, because that's how you get got. That's when you start sacrificing your freedom, is when you're dependent on someone else for your survival. And it's not good foreign policy. Uh, so the idea of something, say, like fracking, which is relevant in the state of Kansas, I understand there's a lot of people that think that it's terrible, it's going to destroy the aquifer and things like that. And um, having worked with engineers and having a degree in engineering, let me tell you something about engineers. They are super nerds, and they love being nerds, and they love solving problems. And they're not these like hand wringing, maniacal, like evil villains that just want to pollute the world. They want clean energy just as much as anyone else does. And the engineering that goes into clean water or landfills or fracking or gasoline, fossil fuel stuff, let alone wind, solar, hydro. They're all in it to try to do the best thing, and generally the best thing is the cheapest thing because it's what can be afforded. That way, you have the infrastructure to create prosperity, which then you can use to create tomorrow's prosperity. And that's kind of where I'm at with it. Because I don't know, growing up, like you hear things about solar, wind, and hydro coming from a Gen Xer or old millennial, whatever you want to call me, a young Gen X, old millennial. I learned about how solar, wind, and hydro were so good, and then now you learn about like, oh, well, these dams are preventing all of the fish from being able to swim upstream, or you hear about how solar plants and batteries, you have to like mine all of this stuff and all of the horrible mining that you need in order to have the battery power that you need for solar to work, or how wind tunnels or the wind farms, how they're not reliable, and then they mess with bird migration, and then they break down so that you're spending money to more or less just fix it later on. It's why what you need infrastructure that is the cheapest infrastructure you can build, because that is inherently the best infrastructure, because it will always produce the most productivity, and the most productivity will create the economy. It will create that future forward. I know this is some word salad stuff, but it's going to create that future forward opportunity. The world is, if all you worry about is some sort of apocalypse, then that's all you're ever going to see. And that's not what it's about. I've been told for decades about how we're going to run out of gasoline by the year 2000 or by the year 2030. The sea levels will destroy everything. And I just I just don't believe it because I've already been listening to apocalypses, promised apocalypses that have never come. And infrastructure needs to progress forward. And you can't just snap your fingers and wave a magic wand and be like, we're going to outlaw all the gasoline and that's going to somehow help. It will not help. That is what will create the apocalypse. And, I think like there's a big silicon chip factory or something like that that's getting built in Kansas, fairly close to Topeka. Doesn't matter where. And the idea is that they're going to need to use water and electricity in order to do what they need to do, and it's going to produce all of these jobs and all of these things that are good and all that sort of stuff, and how this company is getting tax credits to do that. And I'm just like, no, I don't think so. Like you should be paying your taxes to get the infrastructure that you need. Because otherwise now you've got all these people that are paying it. And I'm not a big fan of screwing over people for corporate interest. Infrastructure is good. We should be able to find infrastructure that helps promote business, that helps promote the civilian population, without sacrificing having people pay higher taxes just so that they can have a job. That does not help. So I didn't want this to be a terribly long video, and I guess it's not, because I think I've said at least what I want to say is at least as best as I can. Like I said, infrastructure is good, but the cheapest infrastructure is the best. Not because that's always true, if you buy shoes or something like that. But when you look at multi-million dollar, billion dollar like road plans and building factories or power plants, whether they're solar or wind or fossil fuel based, you need the ones that are the cheapest, because those are always the ones that are going to be the most productive, because there's a lot of really smart people in the sciences that are working on this. And you need to have a little faith in it, because I have been promised the apocalypse so many times. I don't really care. If it comes, it comes. If it doesn't come, then all of that destruction, think of the lives that are destroyed by forcing gasoline prices to go up by higher taxes just because gasoline bad. That does not help people. And politicians should be about helping people. And right now, fossil fuels help. Fossil fuels are the path to green technology. I'm all about recycling. I'm all about the green stuff. I'm all about that. But you can't just destroy civilization in order to make a green civilization. It's going to have to be a natural, capitalistic transition. And I think I'll just leave it at that. And thanks a lot for listening. And today's October 20th. So what do we've got? 11 plus 5, 16 more days until the election. Sounds about right. Anyway, have a good one. Bye.